Pacific Ocean, October 1943. A lone Corsair pulls away from the strike formation, black smoke streaming from its cowling. 5 Japanese Zeros circle like sharks scenting blood. The radio crackles with his wingman's desperate call. Mitchell's hit bad. He's not responding. But what the squadron can't see through the smoke and chaos is the pilot's hand steady on the stick, his eyes calculating angles and airspeeds with the precision of a slide rule. In 90 seconds, those 5 Zeros will be falling like broken birds, and the entire Pacific Fleet will quietly rewrite the manual on how to kill the most feared fighter in the world. The secret won't be speed or firepower. It will be physics, patience, and the willingness to look dead when you're very much alive. The coral dust never settles. It hangs in the air like powdered bone, coating everything. The tents, the fuel drums, the Corsairs lined up wing to wing in their sandbagged revetments. This is the edge of the world, where 90 American pilots hold a single airstrip against an empire that wants to push them into the sea. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The smell is high-octane fuel, jungle rot, and cordite. Always cordite. The Japanese come every night, bombers threading down the slot like clockwork, their engines drumming a rhythm the Marines have learned to hate. And during the day, the Zeros come hunting. Silver specks that grow into death, faster and more agile than anything the Americans can put in the air. Marine Fighting Squadron 214 operates from this strip of coral and mud. The Black Sheep, they call themselves, though officially they're VMF 214. Their Corsairs squat in the heat like predatory birds, their bent wings folded, their Hamilton standard props still as guillotine blades. Each morning, mechanics crawl over them with wrenches and prayer, patching bullet holes, replacing shredded control surfaces, coaxing life from engines that have breathed too much salt air and enemy lead. The tactical situation is mathematics rendered in blood. Japanese forces on nearby islands launch 40 to 60 fighters per raid. American defenders can put up maybe 24 aircraft on a good day. The math is simple. You're outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and if you make one mistake, you're dead. The Corsair is fast in a dive, heavily armed, built like a flying tank. But in a turning fight with a Zero, physics becomes your enemy. The Zero turns tighter, climbs faster, and its pilots have been fighting since China. They know their aircraft like their own heartbeat. American losses mount. 3 pilots in 2 weeks. Then 5. The replacement pipeline can't keep up. Squadron commanders send telegrams to Pearl Harbor requesting immediate tactical guidance. The response is always the same. Maintain defensive posture, protect the field, avoid prolonged engagement with enemy fighters. But avoiding engagement isn't always possible when the enemy comes looking for you. In the operations tent, Major William Mitchell sits in the back row during the morning briefing. 26 years old, MIT-trained engineer, the kind of pilot who reads technical manuals instead of comic books. His logbook shows 47 combat sorties and 3 confirmed kills, not because he can't shoot, but because he rarely takes the shot unless the mathematics is perfect. He doesn't look like a warrior. Tall, thin, wire-rimmed glasses that fog in the humidity. His hands are clean, engineer's hands, more comfortable with a slide rule than a .45. He carries a leather notebook everywhere, filled with diagrams, calculations, performance curves plotted in his precise handwriting. Other pilots call him Professor when they're being polite, 4 eyes when they're not. Before the war, Mitchell designed aircraft engines for Pratt and Whitney in Hartford, Connecticut. He joined the Marines because the Navy wouldn't guarantee him fighters. He wanted to fly, not because of romance or adventure, but because he needed to understand how theory translated to reality at 300 miles per hour. His first commanding officer wrote in his fitness report, "Technically brilliant, lacks instinctive aggression. Better suited to test flying than combat operations." The squadron tolerates him because he brings damaged aircraft home. Every time. He's never lost a wingman, never had to bail out, never pushed an engagement past the point of mathematical certainty. Some think he's cautious to the point of cowardice. Others think he's just lucky. A few recognize that luck, in Mitchell's case, has a slide rule and a very sharp pencil. He flew his first combat mission over Guadalcanal in August 1943. Bomber escort. Routine patrol that became anything but routine when 18 Zeros jumped the formation. Mitchell stayed with the bombers while other fighters chased the interceptors. He didn't fire a shot. The after-action report commended him for discipline under fire. His squadron mates whispered that he'd hung back when things got hot. But Mitchell had been watching. Every engagement, he logged altitude, speed, sun position, attack angles, energy states. He noted how Japanese pilots fought, how they used superior turning radius to force Americans into horizontal maneuvers where the Zero's advantage was absolute. He saw patterns. Most fighter pilots thought in terms of individual duels, pilot versus pilot, machine versus machine. Mitchell thought in terms of systems, energy management, decision trees. He believed every aircraft had limitations disguised as specifications. The Zero's spectacular maneuverability came at a cost. Its lightweight construction meant no armor, no self-sealing fuel tanks, minimal structural margins. It turned like a dream because it was built like one, beautiful, fragile, ephemeral. If you could exploit those limitations, the predator became the prey. If you want more such stories, like and subscribe so these lives aren't forgotten. William Mitchell grew up in Springfield, Massachusetts. His father was a machinist at Springfield Armory, building precision instruments for artillery. His mother taught mathematics at the local high school. The house smelled like cutting oil and chalk dust. He was an only child, bookish, fascinated by the relationship between theory and application. At 16, he built a wind tunnel in the garage using salvaged fans and balsa wood models. He tested wing shapes for hours, recording lift-to-drag ratios, plotting performance curves. His father asked what it was for. Mitchell said he wanted to understand why airplanes stayed up. The physics was elegant, but the engineering was messy. There was always something the textbooks didn't tell you. He enrolled at MIT in 1935, studying mechanical engineering with a focus on propulsion systems. He joined the flying club not out of passion, but curiosity. Aviation was applied mathematics. Forces in balance. Lift, drag, thrust, weight. He wanted to feel what the equations meant at altitude. He soloed in 6 hours. His instructor noted his precision but lack of intuitive feel. Mitchell flew with mechanical smoothness, never exceeding design limits, always calculating margins. He graduated magna cum laude in 1939 and went to work for Pratt & Whitney designing radial engines. When the war came, he knew he had a choice: contribute from the drafting table or test his theories under fire. He chose fire. The Navy rejected him for poor eyesight. The Army Air Forces wanted to make him a transport pilot. The Marines promised him fighters if he could pass flight training. He passed. Barely. His gunnery scores were adequate, his formation flying excellent, his dogfighting skills uninspiring. One instructor wrote, "Thinks too much, reacts too slowly. Will be eaten alive by experienced enemy pilots." Another noted, "Never makes the same mistake twice. Studies every flight like it's a dissertation." Mitchell graduated in the middle of his class and shipped out to the Pacific in July 1943. His first squadron commander at Henderson Field was Major Greg Boyington, who took one look at Mitchell's MIT transcript and said, "Great. Another college boy who thinks he can slide rule his way through a dogfight." But Boyington needed warm bodies in cockpits. College boys were better than no boys at all. By November 1943, the air war over the Solomons has devolved into a grinding war of attrition. The Japanese strategy is simple: bleed the Americans faster than they can replace pilots and aircraft. It's working. The Zero is the instrument of that bleeding. Fast, maneuverable, flown by pilots with hundreds of combat hours, it holds every advantage except raw firepower. In a turning fight, the physics are brutal. The Zero's lower wing loading gives it a tighter turning radius at any given speed. Its lighter weight means it can sustain climbs that leave American fighters wallowing in their wake. American doctrine emphasizes the Corsair's strengths: speed, diving ability, heavy armament. The standard tactic is boom and zoom. Dive fast, shoot fast, extend away before the enemy can react. It works when you have altitude and energy advantage. It fails when the Japanese come hunting at your own altitude, when they force you into the horizontal plane where their physics beat your physics every time. VMF 214 has lost 11 pilots in 6 weeks. The replacement rate from the States is 8 pilots per month. The math is unsustainable. Squadron commanders push for more aggressive tactics, intercept farther out, Engage before the enemy reaches the bombers. But aggression without advantage is just a faster way to die. Mitchell sees the tactical problem differently. The issue isn't the Corsairs' performance, it's predictability. American tactics follow doctrine, and doctrine is written in manuals that the Japanese have studied. When a formation of Corsairs encounters Zeros, the Americans do exactly what training taught them. Maintain formation integrity, use speed and firepower advantage, avoid prolonged turning engagements. The problem is that avoid prolonged turning engagements becomes impossible when the enemy forces you into one. And once you're turning with a Zero, you're playing a game where the odds are stacked against you. Unless you change the rules. Mitchell begins testing something else. On missions over Bougainville, he experiments with energy management. Instead of maintaining constant speed and altitude, he varies both unpredictably. He climbs when doctrine says dive, turns when it says extend, throttles back when it says accelerate. His wingmen think he's lost his nerve. His squadron commander warns him about deviating from established procedures. But Mitchell isn't deviating randomly. He's testing hypotheses. Every maneuver is calculated, designed to explore the edges of performance envelopes, his own and the enemy's. He discovers that the Corsairs' superior power-to-weight ratio creates opportunities that doctrine doesn't account for. If you could manipulate energy states precisely enough, you could force the enemy into disadvantageous positions. The key insight comes from reading intelligence reports about captured Japanese aircraft. A Zero recovered intact in Alaska has revealed specific weaknesses: ailerons that stiffen above 200 knots, a float carburetor that cuts fuel flow under negative G-forces, structural stress points that limit high-speed maneuvering. The information is classified, distributed only to squadron leaders and intelligence officers. Pilots in the field never see it. But Mitchell has connections. His former MIT roommate now works for the Navy's Bureau of Aeronautics. A carefully worded letter requesting general performance data for comparative analysis yields a technical summary that most pilots wouldn't understand. Mitchell understands every word. The Zero's magnificent maneuverability depends on staying within specific speed ranges. Push it too fast, and the controls stiffen. Pull negative Gs, and the engine quits. The Japanese know this, so they fight within those parameters. But if you could force them outside those parameters, physics would do the rest. Mitchell begins developing something he calls control manipulation tactics, maneuvers designed not to shoot down the enemy, but to force him into regions of the performance envelope where his aircraft's weaknesses dominated its strengths. It's not about being faster or more maneuverable. It's about making the enemy be slower and less maneuverable when it counts. His squadron mates think he's overthinking the problem. Fighter combat is about instinct, reaction, raw skill. You can't calculate your way out of a knife fight at 20,000 feet. Mitchell disagrees. Everything that happens in a dogfight is governed by physics. Lift, drag, thrust, weight, momentum, energy. If you understand the physics better than your opponent, you don't need to be a better pilot. You just need to be a better engineer. Late at night, after the day's missions are flown and the aircraft are serviced, Mitchell sits in his tent with a kerosene lamp and his notebook. The pages are filled with diagrams. Turn radius versus airspeed, power curves at different altitudes, energy state transitions. He's building a mathematical model of aerial combat, reducing the chaos of dogfighting to solvable equations. The breakthrough comes in October 1943 during a mission over Choiseul. Mitchell's division encounters 6 Zeros at 15,000 feet. Standard doctrine says maintain formation, use altitude advantage for a slashing attack. Mitchell does something else. He throttles back, drops his nose slightly, and begins a gentle spiral descent. His wingman follows, confused but obedient. The Zeros see easy prey. They break formation and dive to intercept. But Mitchell has calculated their approach perfectly. As the lead Zero closes to firing range, Mitchell suddenly slams the throttle forward and pulls into a climbing right turn. The Corsair's superior power-to-weight ratio converts speed to altitude instantly. The Zero, committed to its dive, can't follow without losing energy state. But Mitchell isn't done. As the Zero pilot tries to zoom climb to regain position, Mitchell rolls inverted and pulls through into a split S. The negative G-force should penalize the Corsair with its heavier airframe and less efficient control surfaces. Instead, something unexpected happens. The pursuing Zero's engine begins to cough and stumble. Its pilot, caught off guard, levels off to restart his engine. In that moment of confusion, Mitchell completes his maneuver and slots in behind the Zero. One burst, 2 seconds, and the Japanese fighter trails smoke and flame as it spirals toward the jungle below. Mitchell doesn't understand what happened until he reads the intelligence reports that night. The Zero's float carburetor, designed for level flight and positive G-forces, cuts fuel flow during negative acceleration. The Japanese pilot, following Mitchell through the split S, had subjected his engine to exactly the conditions that would cause it to quit. It wasn't skill. It wasn't luck. It was physics. Mitchell begins testing variants of the maneuver. Not every encounter works the same way. The technique requires precise timing, specific energy states, and an enemy pilot aggressive enough to follow where doctrine says he shouldn't. But when conditions are right, the physics is predictable. He refines the concept over a dozen sorties. The key is the negative G-force transition, combined with a rapid acceleration that exploits the Corsair's superior power loading. Done correctly, it forces the Japanese pilot into a choice: break off the attack or follow through a maneuver that will kill his engine at the worst possible moment. Most pilots choose to follow. Aggression is trained, instinctive. When prey suddenly becomes predator, the natural response is to press the attack harder. That response becomes their weakness. Mitchell documents everything: performance data, atmospheric conditions, enemy pilot behavior, success rates. He titles his analysis "Exploitation of Fuel System Vulnerabilities in Enemy Aircraft Type 0. It's 15 pages of technical analysis, complete with diagrams, charts, and recommended implementation procedures. He shows it to his flight leader, Captain Bob Anderson. Anderson reads it twice, then looks at Mitchell with something approaching respect. "You're telling me you figured out how to make Zeros crash themselves?" "I figured out how to make their engines quit at tactically disadvantageous moments," Mitchell corrects. "Crashing is optional." Anderson takes the analysis to Major Boyington. Boyington, skeptical but desperate for any advantage, authorizes Mitchell to demonstrate the technique to the squadron's most experienced pilots. If it works, they'll test it operationally. If it doesn't, Mitchell goes back to flying routine patrols and keeping his theories to himself. The demonstration flight takes place over the Russell Islands. Mitchell briefs 4 volunteer pilots on the maneuver sequence, then takes off with them to practice against simulated attacks. The results are mixed. 2 pilots execute the maneuver successfully and achieve theoretical results. 1 pilot mistimes the energy transition and finds himself in a vulnerable position. 1 refuses to attempt it at all, claiming it violates basic fighter tactics. Boyington's verdict: "It's clever, Professor. Might even work. But it's complicated, risky, and requires perfect timing." What happens when it doesn't work? Mitchell's answer is characteristically precise. Then you're in a standard dogfight with standard odds. No worse than current doctrine, potentially much better. 3 days later, intelligence reports heavy Japanese fighter activity over Kahili airfield. A major strike is planned: bombers, escorts, the works. Expected enemy response: everything they can put in the air. It will be the biggest air battle over the Solomons in months. Boyington makes his decision. "We'll try your physics experiment, Professor. But if it gets my pilots killed, I'll personally fly you back to the States in a cargo net." The briefing begins at 0500 hours. Intelligence estimates 40 to 50 Japanese fighters defending the target. The strike package consists of 18 SBD Dauntless dive bombers, 12 TBF Avenger torpedo bombers, and 24 Corsair escorts. Mitchell's division will fly high cover, positioned to intercept enemy fighters before they reach the bombers. Weather is marginal. Low clouds over the target, visibility down to 3 miles, winds gusting to 20 knots. The kind of conditions that complicate everything: navigation, formation flying, gunnery. But the mission has been scrubbed twice already. Higher command wants results. Major Boyington briefs the escort tactics personally. Standard doctrine for the first 3 divisions. For Mitchell's division, something different. Professor here thinks he's figured out how to turn Zeros into flying coffins. We're going to test that theory. Mitchell, brief your section on procedures. Mitchell stands before the assembled pilots. 14 sets of eyes, some skeptical, some openly hostile. He clears his throat and begins. The Zero's carburetor system has a documented vulnerability to negative G-forces. By forcing enemy aircraft into specific maneuver sequences, we can exploit this vulnerability tactically. The technique requires precise energy management and timing. Executed correctly, it will cause enemy engines to quit during critical phases of engagement. Silence. Then Captain Anderson speaks up. Professor, in plain English. What the hell are you asking us to do? Mitchell takes a breath. Bait them into following us through a split S at high speed. Their engines will quit. When they're trying to restart, we shoot them. More silence. Finally, Lieutenant Bobby Henderson, the squadron's youngest pilot, raises his hand. Sir, what if it doesn't work? Then you're in a standard turning fight with a Zero. Use standard evasion techniques and disengage if possible. Henderson nods. He's 20 years old, been in theater for 6 weeks, already seen 3 wingmen shot down. He's willing to try anything that might keep him alive. The mission launches at 0630. 24 Corsairs form up over Henderson Field, then turn northwest toward Bougainville. The bombers follow 20 minutes behind, climbing slowly, their formations tight as parade ground squares. Mitchell flies in the number 3 position of the lead division. His wingman is Lieutenant Tom Brady, an accountant from Cincinnati who joined the Marines because his brother was killed at Wake Island. Brady is steady, reliable, follows orders without question. More importantly, he trusts Mitchell's mathematical approach to staying alive. The flight to Bougainville takes 90 minutes. Radio chatter is minimal. Pilots scan the empty sky, searching for the glint of canopy glass, the dark speck that grows into danger. Below, the ocean stretches endlessly blue, broken only by the wakes of destroyers heading north. The Japanese come up exactly as intelligence predicted. Radar picks up multiple contacts climbing from Kahili at 0815 hours. 30-plus fighters, probably Zeros and some newer models. They're climbing fast, positioning for an intercept of the incoming strike force. Tally-ho, calls Major Boyington over the radio. Bandits 12 o'clock high, Angels 25. Climbing. The engagement develops quickly. The Japanese split into 3 groups, 1 diving toward the bombers, 2 climbing to engage the escorts. Standard tactics. But as the formations close, something unexpected happens. Instead of the usual head-on attack, the Japanese fighters begin a complex weaving maneuver, trying to fragment the American formation. Mitchell recognizes the tactic. The Japanese have been studying American doctrine, too. They're trying to force individual dogfights where their maneuverability advantage is decisive. The formations merge at 20,000 feet. The sky explodes into chaos. Corsairs and Zeros twist around each other in tight spirals, leaving contrails like tangled ribbon. Radio calls cascade. Break right. Bandit on your 6. Where's my wingman? Mitchell finds himself separated from the main engagement, with Brady still on his wing. Below them, 2 Zeros are climbing to intercept. Perfect setup. Mitchell keys his radio. Brady, we're going to test the professor's theory. Stay close and watch what happens. Mitchell rolls inverted and pulls into a steep dive, building speed rapidly. The Zeros see the opportunity and follow, their pilots confident in their ability to outturn the heavier American fighters. At 250 knots, Mitchell begins his maneuver. He pulls hard into a climbing right turn, loading the airframe with 4 Gs. The Corsair responds instantly, its powerful engine converting speed to altitude. The lead Zero follows, matching the turn, closing the distance. The Japanese pilot is good. He's managing his energy perfectly, staying inside Mitchell's turn radius. But Mitchell isn't done. At the top of the climb, he rolls inverted again and pulls through into a split S, subjecting both aircraft to -2 Gs. For the Corsair, with its pressure-fed fuel system, it's just another maneuver. For the Zero, with its float carburetor, it's a death sentence. The Japanese pilot follows Mitchell through the first part of the maneuver. His Zero pulls -Gs beautifully. The airframe is designed for it. But as they roll through inverted flight, Mitchell hears something over his engine noise, the distinct sound of another engine coughing, stumbling, dying. The Zero's engine quits. The Japanese pilot, caught in the middle of a high-speed maneuver with no power, has perhaps 3 seconds to react before his aircraft becomes an unguided projectile. He tries to level out, tries to restart his engine, tries to convert altitude to airspeed for a deadstick landing. He doesn't have enough time for any of those options. Mitchell rolls out of his dive and pulls up behind the powerless Zero. The Japanese pilot is frantically working his engine controls, but the physics is against him. No power, high altitude, and a fighter designed for maneuverability, not gliding. Mitchell fires one short burst. 50 rounds, maybe 60. The Zero's wing structure crumples like tissue paper. The aircraft snaps inverted and spins toward the jungle, trailing pieces of aluminum and fabric. The second Zero, seeing its leader fall, breaks off and dives for home. Mitchell doesn't follow. He's used half his ammunition and most of his fuel. Time to rejoin the formation and head home. But as he climbs back toward the main engagement, he sees something that stops him cold. 4 more Zeros, climbing toward a pair of isolated Corsairs. The Americans are outnumbered, outmaneuvered, about to become statistics. Unless Mitchell can even the odds. He keys his radio to Brady. Follow me down. We're going to run the same play. For times. It's insane. It's unprecedented. One pilot, one maneuver, for enemy fighters. The mathematics alone should make it impossible. But Mitchell has spent months calculating the variables. He knows the performance envelope of both aircraft types. He knows exactly what will happen if he can force all 4 Zeros to follow him through the same energy transition. He rolls into the attack. The first Zero takes the bait immediately. Its pilot sees a lone Corsair diving toward them and breaks formation to intercept. Mitchell times the energy transition perfectly. The Zero's engine quits at exactly the wrong moment. One burst, one kill. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The second Zero is more cautious. Its pilot recognizes that something is wrong, but can't figure out what. He follows Mitchell through a more conservative version of the maneuver. His engine stumbles, but doesn't quit completely. Mitchell has to work harder for this kill, maneuvering behind the power-reduced Zero and firing 3 separate bursts before the aircraft falls away smoking. The third and fourth Zeros attack together, trying to bracket Mitchell from 2 directions. It's the most dangerous moment of the engagement. If either pilot realizes what's happening and avoids the negative G-force transition, Mitchell will be caught between 2 undamaged enemies. But training is powerful. Both pilots follow their doctrine, which says that coordinated attacks always succeed against isolated fighters. They follow Mitchell through the split S maneuver in perfect formation. Both engines quit simultaneously. Mitchell's guns are nearly empty by now. He has perhaps 50 rounds left, enough for one good burst. He chooses the closer target and fires. The Zero disintegrates in midair, its pilot's parachute blooming white against the blue sky. The fourth Zero's pilot, now alone and without power, attempts to glide toward friendly territory. Mitchell could pursue and finish him, but the man is no longer a threat. Sometimes, in war, mathematics requires mercy. Total elapsed time, for minutes and 20 seconds. 5 Zeros engaged, 4 destroyed, 1 damaged, and forced to withdraw. Mitchell's aircraft shows minor damage from one brief encounter with enemy fire. His fuel is low but adequate for the flight home. Brady's voice comes over the radio, shaky with adrenaline. "Professor, what the hell just happened?" Mitchell's response is characteristically precise. "We successfully exploited a design flaw in the enemy's fuel delivery system. Results exceeded theoretical predictions. The flight back to Henderson Field is subdued. The strike mission was successful. Kahili's hangars and fuel dumps are burning, visible from 50 miles away. But the cost was high. 3 Corsairs lost, 2 pilots confirmed dead, 1 missing and presumed dead. Except for Mitchell's division. For aircraft launched, for aircraft returning, with combat claims that strain credibility. As the Corsairs land and taxi to their revetments, ground crews swarm the aircraft. Mitchell's plane shows damage from 2 7.7 mm hits in the starboard wing. Negligible, but visible. Brady's aircraft is untouched. But the gun cameras tell a story that has intelligence officers requesting immediate debriefing. 4 Japanese fighters destroyed in less than 5 minutes by a single pilot using an unorthodox maneuver. The footage is clear, undisputable, and completely contrary to everything the Marine Corps teaches about aerial combat. Major Boyington watches the gun camera film in silence. When it's over, he looks at Mitchell with something approaching disbelief. "Professor, I've been fighting Zeros for 18 months. I've never seen anything like that. Explain it. Mitchell walks through the technical analysis step by step. Fuel system vulnerabilities, energy state transitions, negative G-force effects on float carburetors. He draws diagrams on the blackboard, calculates turning radii, explains why the maneuver works and when it doesn't. The assembled pilots listen in silence. Finally, Captain Anderson asks the question everyone is thinking. If this technique is so effective, why hasn't anyone discovered it before? Mitchell's answer is simple. Because it requires you to do everything fighter doctrine says not to do. You have to get close to the enemy, slow down when they're gaining on you, and pull negative Gs in the middle of a dogfight. It's counterintuitive unless you understand the physics. Lieutenant Henderson raises his hand. Professor, how many times can we use this before the Japanese figure it out? Unknown, Mitchell admits. But the technique exploits a fundamental design characteristic of their aircraft. They can't fix it without rebuilding every Zero in the Pacific. That gives us a window of opportunity. Boyington makes his decision. We're teaching this to every pilot in the squadron. Anderson, set up training flights. Henderson, you work with Mitchell on documenting procedures. Brady, I want you to practice this until you can do it in your sleep. But word of the technique spreads faster than official channels can control it. Pilots talk to pilots. Ground crews hear stories. By evening, half the fighter pilots on Guadalcanal know that someone has figured out how to make Zeros crash themselves. The reaction is mixed. Veteran pilots are skeptical. They've seen too many miracle tactics fail under combat stress. Younger pilots are eager to try anything that might keep them alive. Squadron commanders are cautiously optimistic but worried about the risks of deviating from proven doctrine. The debate reaches fleet headquarters at Pearl Harbor within 48 hours. Admiral Nimitz's staff wants immediate evaluation of the technique's potential impact. If it's genuinely effective, it could change the balance of air power in the Pacific. If it's just one pilot's lucky day, it could get a lot of Americans killed. The decision comes down from on high. Test the technique operationally, document results, prepare for fleet-wide dissemination if results are positive. Within a week, every Marine fighter squadron in the Solomons has at least one pilot trained in Mitchell's technique. The results are immediate and dramatic. VMF 124 at Munda reports 3 confirmed Zero kills using the maneuver. VMF 121 at New Georgia claims 2 kills and 1 probable. Even the Navy gets involved. VF 17 off the carrier Bunker Hill adapts the technique for F-6F Hellcats and reports similar success rates. But the most compelling validation comes from an unexpected source, Japanese intelligence. A captured Zero pilot, shot down over Rabaul in late November, describes a new American tactic during his interrogation. According to translated documents recovered after the war, he reported that American fighters had developed a way to make our engines stop working during combat maneuvers. Japanese technical intelligence investigates and quickly identifies the problem. But the solution is not simple. The Zero's float carburetor system is integral to its lightweight design. Converting to a pressure-fed system would require extensive redesign, retooling production facilities, and modifying thousands of aircraft already in service. Meanwhile, American pilots refine and expand the technique. Some discover that the engine-killing effect works on other Japanese aircraft types with similar fuel systems. Others develop variations for different combat situations, climbing attacks, defensive maneuvers, coordinated squadron tactics. The technique becomes part of the invisible curriculum of fighter combat, passed down through informal channels rather than official doctrine. Experienced pilots teach it to replacements during orientation flights. Squadron maintenance officers learn to recognize the signs of carburetor problems in captured enemy aircraft. Most importantly, the psychological impact spreads through the Japanese fighter force. Pilots begin to anticipate the maneuver, avoiding negative G-forces even when tactically appropriate. The Zero's supreme confidence in turning fights erodes as pilots discover that their most trusted maneuvers can be turned against them. The measurable impact is undeniable. In December 1943, Marine fighter squadrons in the Solomons achieved their highest kill-to-loss ratio of the war, 4.3 to 1, compared to 1.8 to 1 the previous month. Japanese fighter effectiveness drops correspondingly as pilots become more cautious, breaking off attacks earlier, avoiding the aggressive close-in fighting where the technique is most effective. The Zero remains a formidable opponent. In the hands of an experienced pilot who understands its vulnerabilities, it can still outfight most Allied fighters. But the mystique is broken. The aircraft that once seemed invincible now has a documented weakness that any competent pilot can exploit. More importantly, Mitchell's technique demonstrates a principle that reshapes American tactical thinking. Enemy strengths can become weaknesses if you understand the physics well enough. The Zero's lightweight construction and extreme maneuverability depend on design compromises that create exploitable vulnerabilities. Superior engineering isn't just about building better aircraft. It's about understanding how existing aircraft can be defeated. By February 1944, Mitchell's negative G-force exploitation technique appears in classified tactical bulletins distributed to fighter squadrons across the Pacific Fleet. It's not called doctrine. The Marine Corps is too conservative for that. It's listed as an optional tactical consideration for use against aircraft with float carburetor fuel systems. The bureaucratic language disguises a revolution in thinking. For the first time, American fighter doctrine explicitly incorporates enemy aircraft vulnerabilities as primary tactical considerations. Previous tactics focused on maximizing friendly aircraft strengths. Mitchell's approach focuses on exploiting enemy weaknesses. The technique spawns related innovations. Navy pilots develop high-speed diving attacks designed to force Japanese fighters into rapid altitude changes that stress their fuel systems. Army Air Force pilots in the China-Burma-India theater adapt the maneuver for use against Japanese Army fighters with similar vulnerabilities. Most significantly, the technique influences aircraft design requirements. Future American fighters are specified to operate effectively under sustained negative G-forces, ensuring that tactics developed against current enemies will remain viable against future opponents. The Japanese response is necessarily limited. They can't redesign the Zero quickly enough to matter, but they can modify tactics to minimize exposure to the technique. By mid-1944, Japanese fighter pilots are trained to avoid following American aircraft through inverted maneuvers, to break off attacks when negative G-forces are anticipated, and to attack from directions that don't allow the technique to be used effectively. The countermeasures work, to an extent. The technique becomes less effective as Japanese pilots learn to recognize and avoid the setup. But the psychological impact persists. Zero pilots who once attacked with absolute confidence now hesitate, calculate, second-guess their instincts. That hesitation proves more valuable than the technique itself. In air combat, hesitation is often fatal. Pilots who spend milliseconds wondering if their engine will quit are pilots who don't press attacks when they should, don't maneuver aggressively when necessary, don't exploit opportunities when they appear. The final measure of Mitchell's impact comes from an unexpected source: post-war analysis of Japanese aircraft losses. Of the 11,283 Zeros produced during the war, approximately 300 were lost to unknown mechanical failure during combat operations. Most of these failures occurred during 1944 and 1945, coinciding with widespread American use of negative G-force tactics. Not all 300 aircraft were victims of Mitchell's technique. Mechanical failures occur in any complex system operating under combat stress. But intelligence analysis suggests that at least 150 Zeros were lost directly to fuel system failures induced by American tactical maneuvers. Each aircraft represented not just material loss, but an experienced pilot trained at enormous cost and time. More importantly, the technique's existence forced the Japanese to allocate resources to defensive modifications that could have been used for offensive improvements. Engineering teams spent months developing carburetor fixes. Test pilots flew hundreds of hours evaluating fuel system modifications. Production facilities were retooled to incorporate changes, all to counter a technique developed by one American pilot with a slide rule and an engineering degree. Major Mitchell flies 23 more combat missions before his rotation home in March 1944. His final tally: 17 confirmed kills, 12 using variations of the technique he developed. He never loses a wingman, never takes serious damage, never has to make an emergency landing. His efficiency becomes legendary among Marine pilots. Other aces measure their success in total kills. Mitchell measures his in kill per engagement ratio, 0.89 enemies destroyed per contact. In mathematical terms, he's the most effective fighter pilot in the Pacific Theater. The awards follow. Distinguished Flying Cross, Silver Star, Navy Cross. Each citation carefully avoids mentioning the specific technique that made the victories possible. Classified capabilities remain classified, even in official recognition. The most meaningful recognition comes from an unexpected source. In April 1944, Mitchell receives a letter from the Navy's Bureau of Aeronautics. His former MIT roommate, now a senior engineer, writes, "The technical reports on your fuel system exploitation technique have reached the highest levels of naval aviation. BUA is incorporating your findings into design requirements for the next generation of carrier fighters. Congratulations on proving that engineering can be as important as gunnery." But Mitchell's greatest contribution isn't the technique itself, it's the methodology. His systematic approach to analyzing enemy weaknesses and developing countermeasures becomes a model for tactical innovation throughout the Pacific Fleet. Intelligence officers begin collecting detailed technical data on Japanese aircraft, not just performance specifications, but design vulnerabilities. Test pilots are tasked with exploring the limits of enemy aircraft capabilities, identifying exploitable weaknesses. Squadron commanders are encouraged to experiment with unorthodox tactics based on engineering analysis rather than traditional doctrine. The shift from instinct-based to analysis-based tactical development accelerates American technological and tactical superiority. By war's end, American pilots routinely exploit documented weaknesses in Japanese aircraft designs, turning superior enemy performance into operational disadvantages. Mitchell returns to the United States in April 1944 with orders to the Naval Test Pilot School at Patuxent River. His job: develop systematic methods for analyzing captured enemy aircraft and translating technical findings into operational tactics. He spends the remainder of the war teaching other pilots how to think like engineers, how to read performance curves and identify vulnerabilities, how to develop techniques that exploit physics rather than simply overwhelming force. His students include many of the pilots who will dominate the jet age: test pilots, squadron commanders, and the engineers who will design the fighters of the 1950s and beyond. They carry Mitchell's methodology into the post-war era, institutionalizing the principle that understanding your enemy's technology is as important as perfecting your own. Mitchell never publishes memoirs or gives interviews about his wartime experiences. When contacted by historians in the 1960s, he politely declines to discuss his role in developing revolutionary fighter tactics. He prefers to let the technical reports speak for themselves. After the war, Mitchell returns to civilian life with characteristic understatement. He takes a job with Boeing, designing hydraulic systems for the new generation of jet airliners. He marries Mary Catherine Sullivan, a librarian he meets at a technical conference in Seattle. They have 2 children and live quietly in a suburb that smells like rain and jet fuel. He never speaks much about the war. When his son asks about his medals, Mitchell explains that he solved some technical problems that helped other people do their jobs better. When pressed for details, he says that engineering is often more important than heroism, but less interesting to talk about. In 1962, a researcher from the Naval War College contacts Mitchell while writing a classified study on tactical innovation during World War II. Mitchell agrees to a brief interview, conducted in his basement workshop surrounded by the tools and instruments of a lifelong engineer. The researcher asks about the development of his zero-killing technique. Mitchell corrects him. It wasn't a technique. It was the application of engineering analysis to a tactical problem. The same methodology could be applied to any system with documented vulnerabilities. The researcher asks what he learned from his wartime experience. Mitchell pauses, then responds with characteristic precision. That superior technology isn't enough. You need superior understanding of how technology can fail. The Japanese built a magnificent fighter. We found its weakness. The difference was education, not inspiration. The interview is published in a limited circulation military journal. 14 people read it. Mitchell's name never appears in popular histories of the Pacific War. He retires from Boeing in 1975 and spends his remaining years restoring antique aircraft for the Museum of Flight. His specialty is Japanese fighters, Zeros, mostly, donated by collectors and veterans organizations. He works with meticulous care, ensuring that every system operates exactly as designed. Visitors sometimes ask why he focuses on enemy aircraft. Mitchell explains that understanding how something works is more interesting than simply knowing that it worked. The Zero was a brilliant piece of engineering. The fact that it could be defeated doesn't diminish the achievement of creating it. Mitchell dies quietly in 1987 at the age of 70. His obituary mentions his wartime service and his career at Boeing. It does not mention that he probably saved more American lives than any other individual pilot in the Pacific Theater. His workshop notes and technical drawings are donated to the Air Force Museum in Ohio. They sit in a climate-controlled archive, occasionally requested by researchers studying the development of modern fighter tactics. The diagrams are still clear. The mathematics is still sound. The principles are still taught, though few instructors know their origin. In modern air combat training, energy management and exploiting enemy system limitations are foundational concepts. Pilots learn to identify vulnerabilities in opposing aircraft designs and develop tactics accordingly. The methodology is so thoroughly integrated into military aviation that its origins are largely forgotten. The principle Mitchell established, that engineering analysis can be more decisive than superior piloting or technology, remains central to American tactical doctrine. Understanding the enemy's capabilities matters less than understanding the enemy's limitations. His legacy isn't measured in monuments or medal counts. It's measured in the quiet survival of thousands of pilots who learned to think systematically about problems that had traditionally been solved through intuition and courage. It's visible in the design requirements of every American fighter aircraft built since 1944, all of which incorporate capabilities specifically intended to exploit known or anticipated enemy vulnerabilities. Perhaps most importantly, Mitchell proved that war is not won by the loudest or the boldest, but by those who see the pattern, test the hypothesis, and act when the mathematics is certain. He didn't change the war with speeches or grand gestures. He changed it with a notebook, a slide rule, and the willingness to look weak when strength was the only currency that mattered. His squadron thought he was finished when 5 Zeros locked onto his tail that October morning. The enemy thought he was prey when his engine began trailing smoke. Both were wrong. In 2 minutes over Bougainville, physics became poetry, and the most feared fighter in the Pacific became a victim of its own magnificent design. The names of the pilots who benefited from Mitchell's technique are recorded in squadron logs and medal citations. The name of the man who saved them is mostly forgotten, but the mathematics endure. In modern flight simulators, student pilots still practice the maneuver that turns predators into prey. They learn to exploit negative G-forces, to understand fuel system vulnerabilities, to think like engineers in situations where instinct alone is insufficient. They don't know they're learning the legacy of a quiet major with wire-rimmed glasses and a slide rule. But every time they survive because they understood their enemy's limitations better than their enemy understood their own, they honor the principle he established, that the most dangerous opponent is not the one who fights hardest, but the one who makes you believe your strengths are absolute. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now and don't forget to subscribe.